All right, diving in today, folks. We're going deep on Jean Renoir,
Jean Renoir.
a filmmaker I think continues to kind of blow people's minds, even if they don't, maybe haven't seen his films directly.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? His influence is massive.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's a testament to the power of his vision, and how innovative his approach was to filmmaking.
Well, I think even before we get to the specifics, just think about it. This is the son of Pierre-Auguste Renoir.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like,
Yeah.
talk about artistic lineage.
We're talking like, art royalty.
Oh, yeah, heavy hitters.
But he didn't just follow in those exact footsteps.
No, not at all.
He really carved his own path.
Absolutely. And in a completely different medium, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like he just became an Impressionist filmmaker, right?
Right.
It's a totally different landscape.
Its own whole thing.
Yeah, but you can see that artistic sensibility, that eye,
Absolutely.
just in a different way.
And to have a career that spanned decades, continents, wars.
Right. I mean, he saw it all, the world changing around him.
Exactly.
And cinema itself evolving so rapidly.
And still managed to, like we were saying, have this impact that's undeniable.
Exactly. He wasn't just keeping up, he was shaping the future.
So, all right, let's unpack this Renoir style, as it were. Now, one thing we always hear about Renoir is that he's a humanist filmmaker.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So what does that even mean? I mean, when we talk about humanism in film.
I think with Renoir, it means that he had this really profound empathy for all of his characters.
Right.
Not just, the good guys.
Right. Yeah.
He wasn't interested in simple heroes and villains.
Yeah.
He wanted to show, the full range of human experience, the flaws,
I see this.
the contradictions, all of it.
Yeah.
Because to him, that's what made them real and worthy of our understanding.
It's like he's asking us to see the humanity in everybody, even people who maybe do bad things.
Exactly. And I think, Le Grande Illusion is a perfect example of that.
The Grande Illusion, yeah.
I mean, you've got these French POWs, right?
Right.
From different social classes, officers, working class guys.
Right.
And they're all stuck in this terrible situation.
Yeah.
And Renoir, he shows us their common humanity.
Their camaraderie, their hopes, their, just their longing for connection.
Exactly. And even with their captors,
It's really powerful.
It is. And it's also kind of subtly subverting the whole idea of blind patriotism that was so strong back then.
Right, yeah.
He's saying, look, these nationalistic divides, they're not as important as the things that connect us as human beings.
That's a really interesting point.
And then you've got, La Règle du jeu,
yeah.
which takes this whole complex character thing to a whole nother level.
It really does.
I mean, there's not a single character in that film that's purely good or bad.
Right. It's so hard to know who to root for.
Exactly. And I think that's intentional,
Yeah.
He's not telling us who to like or dislike.
Right.
He's just showing us these flawed, messy human beings.
And then letting us grapple with it.
Yeah, and make up our own minds.
So when you think about this focus on shared humanity and these complex characters,
Yeah.
what do you think it says about Renoir's overall worldview? Like, what's he trying to tell us about the world?
I think he's saying that at our core, we're all connected.
Okay.
That beneath the surface, all the differences, social class, nationality, even our individual morals, there's this shared human experience.
The common ground.
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately a hopeful message, even when he's showing us the darker side of human nature.
It's not naive, but it's hopeful.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about how he actually put this vision on screen.
Okay.
Because he was so innovative with his technique.
Yeah, definitely.
And, one of the things people always point to is his use of deep focus.
Right.
Now, for those of us who maybe didn't go to film school, what is deep focus?
So imagine you're looking at a scene, right? And everything is in focus, from the foreground to the background.
The whole frame.
The whole thing, sharp as a tack.
And traditionally, it would be more like the subject is in focus.
Right, yeah, selective focus.
And the background is blurry.
Exactly. But Renoir, he wanted to keep everything sharp.
Interesting.
And that allows him to do some really cool things with his storytelling.
Like what?
Well, for one, it just makes the world of the film feel richer, more real,
A lot more immersive.
Yeah, like you're actually there.
You're not being told where to look.
Exactly. You're free to explore the frame.
But also, doesn't it emphasize the connection between characters and their environment?
Absolutely. It shows how they're all part of the same world.
They're not isolated.
Right.
They're all kind of woven together.
Yeah, and I think, the party scenes in the Règle du jeu are a great example of this.
Those are incredible.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much going on in those scenes.
Constant movement.
Yeah, and Renoir uses deep focus to capture all of it.
All the little interactions, the glances.
The tensions.
And you're just like swimming in it all.
Yeah, and you become an active viewer,
You're not just passively watching.
You're choosing what to focus on.
Yeah, you're making your own connections.
It's almost like editing the film yourself, in a way.
That's so cool. I never thought about it like that.
It's a really engaging way to watch a film.
It is. It pulls you in.
Yeah, and it also makes the film feel more realistic.
Because you're experiencing it more, like you experience real life.
Exactly. You're not being led by the hand.
Right.
You're figuring things out for yourself.
Which is, kind of the point of Renoir's whole humanism, right?
I think so, yeah.
It's all about understanding.
Understanding and empathy.
Okay, so deep focus is one big thing.
Yeah.
And then there's his use of long takes and camera movement.
Right, he loved to move the camera.
Instead of cutting all the time.
Yeah, he'd just let the camera flow through the scene.
Clyde.
Exactly. And that, combined with the long takes, created this incredible sense of space and time.
It's like the camera becomes another character.
It does, yeah. It's like an invisible observer.
And it's not intrusive.
No, it's very natural.
Yeah, it's like you're just there in the room with the characters.
Exactly.
And again, I think of those scenes in La Règle du jeu.
Yeah.
Where the camera just kind of weaving through these crowds of people.
Like a dance.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And it really heightens the tension,
It does. You're just waiting for something to happen.
Because you're stuck in that moment with the characters.
You can't escape.
Right.
So, what do you think these long takes, these continuous shots,
Yeah.
what do they do to us as viewers? Like, how do they make us feel?
I think they make us feel more present, more connected to the characters and their emotions.
Because we're experiencing it in real time.
Exactly. There's no interruption.
Right.
And it also allows the performances to really breathe.
Yeah, you really get to see the actors work.
And the subtleties of their expressions, the little gestures.
And Renoir was so good at getting those natural performances from his actors.
He was. He had a real gift for it.
Which brings us to naturalism, which is another big part of his style.
Yeah, that's kind of the umbrella over everything we've been talking about, I think.
How so?
Well, he shot on location a lot.
Okay.
Which immediately makes things feel more real, more grounded.
Right, you're not on a soundstage.
And he encouraged improvisation from his actors.
Okay.
He wanted them to feel free, to be spontaneous.
So it wasn't all scripted out.
No, he'd let them find the moments.
And you could really see that in Partie de Campagne, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
That film just feels so effortless and natural.
Yeah, like you're just eavesdropping on these people's lives.
Yeah, and it's funny, too.
Very funny.
Yeah. So how does this naturalism, how does it ultimately make Renoir's films more powerful?
I think it just makes them more believable, more relatable.
We connect with the characters.
We do, because they feel like real people
Yeah.
with real problems, real emotions.
It's not artificial.
And when you believe in the characters, you're more invested in their story.
Right, you care what happens to them.
And that's when a film can really move you.
Absolutely. All right, let's dive into some specific films now.
Okay.
And we have to start with Le Grand Illusion, which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that's a masterpiece.
From 1937.
Right.
And you were talking about how it's an anti-war film that goes beyond just, simple patriotism.
Yeah, it's not about glorifying war.
Right.
It's about the human cost of war.
Our shared experience of these prisoners.
Yeah, and the bonds that they form, even across enemy lines.
And the film seems to be saying that war is ultimately pointless.
Yeah, it's a grand illusion
Right.
that these nationalistic divisions, they're not worth the suffering.
And what's so striking is that the Germans aren't portrayed as monsters.
Right. They're just people, too.
Doing their duty.
Trying to survive.
Which is pretty radical for a film made in the 1930s.
Yeah, especially a war film.
And I'm thinking about the film's title, Le Grand Illusion.
Yep.
And how it was made during a time when, another war was brewing.
Right. The world was on the brink.
So how does this idea of a grand illusion resonate with us today?
I think it's still relevant, unfortunately,
Right.
because we still see these conflicts based on ideology, on nationalism.
Right.
And the film is reminding us that those divisions are often artificial,
They're illusions.
that we have more in common than we think.
And that we should be focusing on those connections.
Exactly. That's the only way to break the cycle of violence.
Okay, moving on to La Règle du jeu.
Right.
From 1939, often considered Renoir's masterpiece.
Yeah, his magnum opus.
A satirical comedy drama set right before World War II.
Right. On the eve of the war.
And what's interesting is that it doesn't directly address the war.
No, but it's definitely about the social and moral climate that led to the war.
Okay.
It's the scathing critique of the French upper class.
Their decadence, their hypocrisy.
Their self-absorption.
And it's told through this really complex narrative.
Yeah, with a huge cast of characters.
And you see all of Renoir's cinematic brilliance on display.
The camera movement, the deep focus, the long takes.
It's a visual feast.
It is, and it's also incredibly funny.
Yeah, it's dark humor.
But it's definitely there.
So this film was actually quite controversial when it came out.
Yeah, it was banned in France for a while.
Why do you think that was?
Well, I mean, it's pretty clear that Renoir is not pulling any punches.
Right. He's going right for the jugular.
He's exposing the rot at the heart of this society.
And I imagine that didn't sit well with the people in power.
No, they didn't appreciate being mocked.
And what about the title, La Règle du jeu, the rules of the game?
Yeah.
What are those rules?
On the surface, it's about the social codes of the upper class.
The unspoken rules of their world.
Right, but I think Renoir is also talking about the rules of the game on a larger scale.
Okay.
The rules of war, the rules of politics.
The rules that lead to these global conflicts.
Exactly, the rules that nobody seems to be able to change.
So it's a film that works on multiple levels.
It does. It's a microcosm of a society on the brink of collapse.
All right, let's jump over to America now.
Okay.
To The Southerner from 1945.
Yeah, a very different kind of film.
Yeah, Renoir in a different setting.
A new world.
It's about a poor farming family struggling to make ends meet in the South.
And it's a beautiful film, very moving.
And even though it's visually different from his French films,
right, it has a different feel.
It still has that same Renoir heart.
Absolutely, that same empathy for his characters.
That same focus on human resilience.
And dignity.
And what do you think, what are the challenges for a European filmmaker trying to capture a specific American region and culture?
I think the biggest challenge is just understanding the nuances.
The subtleties.
Yeah, of a culture that's not your own.
Right.
And avoiding stereotypes.
Yeah, finding the truth.
And I think Renoir does that in The Southerner.
He really gets under the skin of these characters.
He does. He connects with their humanity.
And then we have, all these other films that you mentioned.
Right, like Madame Bovary.
Yeah. The Crème de Monsieur Lange.
The River.
French Can-Can.
Such a range.
I mean, he really did it all, didn't he?
He did. He was a restless spirit.
What do you think drove him to explore all these different subjects and settings?
I think he was just endlessly curious about the world.
About people.
About life itself.
And I think the curiosity is what makes his films so timeless.
I agree.
They're still relevant because they're about the things that connect us as human beings.
Our hopes, our fears, our dreams.
Right?
The things that haven't changed, even though the world has changed so much.
So let's talk about Renoir's legacy. His influence on cinema.
Okay.
It's huge.
It's massive, yeah.
You mentioned some pretty big names earlier.
Like Truffaut, Altman, Mike Leigh.
All these filmmakers who were inspired by him.
And many more.
So what would you say are his most significant contributions?
Well, his technical innovations, for sure.
The deep focus, the long takes.
Yeah, those techniques changed the way films were made.
They opened up new possibilities.
And then there's his humanism.
Right.
His focus on complex characters, his empathy for the underdog.
Which really paved the way for a more nuanced kind of storytelling.
A more realistic, more compassionate cinema.
And you mentioned Truffaut specifically.
Yeah, he was a huge admirer of Renoir.
What do you think Truffaut learned from him?
I think he learned how to combine social observation with deep psychological insight.
To see the world clearly?
But also to see the humanity in everyone.
Even the flawed characters?
Yeah, even the ones who make mistakes.
And what about Altman and Mike Leigh?
Well, Altman's films often have this sprawling ensemble feel.
Right, lots of characters.
Yeah, and that's definitely something he picked up from Renoir.
And Leigh is known for his really intimate, character-driven films.
Very naturalistic.
Yeah, and that's pure Renoir, too.
Absolutely.
So, ultimately, what did Renoir teach us about how to watch films? How to see the world?
He taught us to look beyond the surface.
Okay.
To see the connections between people, the shared humanity.
To empathize.
Yeah, and to be open to different perspectives.
To engage with the world in a more thoughtful way.
And to find the beauty in the everyday.
Yeah, and I think that's a lesson we could all use a little more of these days.
I agree.
So, Jean Renoir, a true cinematic giant.
A master storyteller.
And his films, they're not just entertainment.
They're reflections on the human condition.
They're about the things that matter.
They are, and they continue to resonate with us today.
And I'm wondering, as we're bombarded with information, with so many different viewpoints.
Yeah, it's overwhelming sometimes.
How can we use Renoir's humanism his way of seeing to navigate this world?
That's a great question, and I think it's more important now than ever.
Yeah.
Because Renoir reminds us to slow down, to really look at each other.
To listen.
To try to understand.
And to remember that we're all in this together.
We are, and I think that's a really powerful message.
It is. So if you haven't seen Renoir's films, go check them out.
You won't regret it.
They might just change the way you see the world.
They might.
All right. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Jean Renoir.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.